Welcome back to the Think Bunker. My name is Painful Existence, and today we'll be talking about the evolution of the shotgun. That's right, William. We're doing it for you, bud. That aside, no, seriously, if you have uh, an idea for the bunker briefs and that's something that you want us to talk about, say something. Tell us. We will, as you can see here, we will do it. Well, within reason. So, with that said, if you are new to the channel, welcome. We hope that this kind of content or the other content we have on this channel will interest you further on to watching the rest of our videos and our upcoming videos. If you are a returning viewer, welcome back. We really appreciate that for some reason you are just as psychotic as we are, and therefore you find yourself right at home with us. With that in mind, today, as stated, the evolution of the shotgun. Flip the page.
Yay.
Alright, so we start with blunderbusses. So, the basic build of a blunderbuss is very similar to muskets, time period muskets, in that you powder, wad, and your shot, which for muskets it's also called a shot, and you stuff it into the barrel. Though the difference with the blunderbuss was could be purpose-made pellets or just a bunch of pebbles you found, and it was meant to be a cluster of your shot was a cluster, not a solid projectile. So with this in mind, you see the barrel on all the example images taper out, or not taper out, but expand outward at the end, at the muzzle. It's to help spread. But this has a sort of cursed effect where it would, although spread, your shot tightness would be very poor, and so these things were very practically close range. But to note on this, we didn't start with mass fire weapons because some may believe that mass fire weapons are shotguns, but we'd say against that because shotguns fire a shot, which rifles would then go on to use solid shot, a solid projectile. But shotguns, unless you're counting slugs, fire a cluster style of ammunition. Furthermore, these blunderbusses were really popular and used mostly with the Navy and the Marines to guard ships so that they could more adequately defend against pirates and just ne'er-do-wells on boarding parties and whatnot. There's actually, I know of a real-life example of which I've held in my hands where there is a blunderbuss with I'm not even joking, spring-loaded bayonet that was attached to the end of the barrel, and it folded backward, pointing towards you. And when you needed to deploy it, you could just pull a lever back. It would deploy forwards, and the only reason it did that because the shot spread was so big, it would hit the bayonet. So whenever you needed it, you just pull a lever, and there you go. You have a bayonet on the end of your shotgun. So that is the blunderbuss. And here's the thing with the blunderbuss, the idea of the shotgun that it's a cluster style ammunition that is out of a smoothbore, and it's meant to spread and hit either cause a large burst of damage to an enemy or spread to hit multiple enemies. That would never change throughout history with the shotgun. Very rarely were shotguns utilized for their slugs, mostly because they could fire a cluster style of ammunition. So with that said, that is the blunderbuss, and this is where we start with shotguns.
I do want to say that I know you had said that we agreed on volley guns not being considered shotguns, but I am still heavily conflicted on it
Okay, that's fine.
because there are a few of those that just they almost exist to spite the definition of a shotgun, where they are so close to both where they almost need their own separate thing. It's
Yeah,
like when scientists found the platypus and they're like, "What the heck is this thing? It's a fish, duck, beaver, bird?" Question mark.
You also have the idea of the arquebus and whatnot, where its original design, of course, or you can argue it, it could fire solid shot, which it did oftentimes. It's meant for a longer range thing. Of course, it's incredibly difficult to aim something like that. But you can kind of see naturally how you went from all right, you can fire solid shot out of it. You can also fire, you know, pellets and things as well if you want to just litter the battlefield or whatever the general idea is with pellets of some sort. But of course, they specialized it into the blunderbuss being the shotgun version of the arquebus.
I think the reason why, my reasoning why even if you could consider mass fire weapons to be shotguns, the reason why they didn't outclass or rather take off in comparison to a blunderbuss is because the fact that for one with mass fire weapons, it's just
They're a, they're an extreme pain to load, and there's a lot more moving parts, which means they're more prone to failure.
in comparison
Like,
to the design of the blunderbuss, and also um, with the arquebus, as Sideburns noted, the barrel is it's a little too. The blunderbuss would have beaten it out anyways because this at its job of a volley of just cluster munitions. The blunderbuss would just straight up be better, and I think the blunderbuss starts coming about whenever long muskets and rifles
well, this would have
start coming
the
out because it sort of it's like a it kind of makes up for the shortcomings of a rifle, even though they weren't really used in tandem with each other.
Well, I will say,
this would not have been a good weapon to use instead of an arquebus because of the prevalence of armor during the time period, and with powder quality as low as it was.
Well, I wasn't in
You're,
reference to like using them as a rifle. I was talking about when he was talking about with using arquebuses when you can put pellets like strictly in the if you're using a arquebus or a blunderbuss and you only have pellets to use in that scenario. Like yeah, obviously
I
the
was-
arquebus is just better if it has solid shot against armor.
I would also argue that the arquebus and the blunderbuss, of course, they exist at the same time for the most part, from the 15th to the 18th century, something around there.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I
so that
mean,
that's
kind of.
quite a bit of time. That's quite a bit of time. So there's just say of course the blunderbuss is definitely more specialized towards a very widespread pattern for pellets. They did use the arquebus a lot. Of course, you have the muskets and, of course, eventually actual rifles later on because of the arquebus originally.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, even stuff like the fire lance, which is like technically the first firearm in like the loosest sense of the term, it
Well, it
originally
is a
just uh,
firearm.
the original shot for it was just like rocks that they would put inside of it, rocks, little pieces of metal, stuff that they would found on the ground, and then just
Yeah.
trying to hit the enemy with it. Take
Some soldier issued it was like, all right, wait, this is tech, this is tech.
Mm, love it.
But all in all, this is where the desire for a cluster firing weapon would come about. And so, with that said, that's pretty much all I have for this slide.
All right, we good to move on? All right.
Break actions. So, break actions. The theme of the evolution of the shotgun, its sort of role didn't really change much throughout history, unlike what you see with combat rifles. More so, it's the evolution is mainly in the way you load the weapon and how many shots you can hold in the weapon itself. That's the overall evolution of shotguns. It's just how many you can hold, how fast can you load it. This would also come about with the invention of, well, shells. If you look at the top left, you see brass ammunition. In fact, you would actually have to pack these yourself. These were reusable. You would fire these, repack them, and then seal the end off with wax. And then from there, you had three main styles of break actions. You had double barrel over under, double barrel side by side, and then single barrel. There were triple and quadruple barrel shotguns, but those were, as you could imagine, unwieldy and impractical to really use, because a funny thing about double barrels, if you pull the trigger, one of the barrels will go off, or one of the firing pins will move forward, but if you pull the trigger back all the way, the second barrel goes off. So if you just yoink the trigger, it will set off both barrels. Now imagine
Well,
that with quad barrel shotguns. I think there were some quads that just fire two barrels at the same time.
I will
It's
say, so a lot of the double barrel shotguns, you actually have two triggers, or at least some of the older ones. You have two triggers. You can see in the photo in the very bottom left, I believe. It's got, maybe not.
Yeah,
Can't
no,
really
it's
tell
got
that
two
one.
triggers.
right, and
And it
then there
just
were
depends
ones with
on.
two triggers. It depended on who made which weapon
So
and so on and so forth.
some of the double triggers are actually double triggers, and then some of the double triggers, one of them is a faux trigger, and it just unlocks the gun, so you can reload it.
It's
Hmm.
overall, it's just the main type of builds you had were double over under, double side by side, and then I've heard some people refer to it as double coach or just coach shotguns, but yeah, and then you have single barrel.
And
Typically
my
with
personal favorite over under.
and for over under, I have experience with this shooting in competitions, clay competitions, and just for bird hunting. Your over unders are going to be more accurate because you don't suffer from parallax as much. Actually, almost at all. The the uh, the side by sides you do. There are instances where I've seen people on my team use a double barrel side by side, and when firing, they'll either miss ahead or miss behind and then miss ahead, even though they didn't really change up the speed in which they're tracking the target, purely because the barrels are offset compared to the sights. And funnily enough, these would actually be utilized at longer range, which yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive. You'd think to go, oh, shotgun need range. Well, it does, because the blunderbuss, its practical lethal range was almost nothing because it's short barrel and it's very widened muzzle. But with longer barrel shotguns, you had a tighter spread. You really want a lot of pellets to connect, and the more pellets connect, the better. Furthermore, the term I call shotgun actually refers back to these style of shotguns. Back in the coach and wagon era, you had banking carts or just any kind of wagon that would ride along roads, and typically, or you could be robbed. Now, the driver is not exactly, I mean, you could, but it's not exactly recommended that the driver carry a loaded shotgun in his hands while driving the coach. So, what they would do is have someone sitting next to them with a shotgun to ward off bandits. And if one guy had a shotgun, you could also find probably some more in the back of the thing. So with that said, that's where the term I call shotgun comes from, is because you would have a guy riding next to the driver with a shotgun.
All right. Is that all for break actions?
That's all I have. Kento?
Um, if I'm understanding what you're saying, my computer's having a little bit of a stroke.
Hmm.
Yes.
All right.
I'm good.
Oh, okay.
Guess we'll move on.
Pump actions. This is, again, you carry more rounds, you can load them faster. With break actions, as you can imagine, you have to break open the rifle. Oh, Sideburns, wasn't there something you were wanted to talk about with the single actions?
There
A
actually
certain.
was, reminding me. So on certain single action shotguns, specifically a break barrel, typically single barrel shotguns, there was a little contraption that was invented. And kind of interesting. Its main purpose was to basically add a magazine to a single shot break action shotgun by having a tube that fed a smaller tube that inserted shotgun shells into the breech of the gun when the action was broken or when you break the barrel down. It's a very interesting process. It's almost almost a little impractical, but you could argue it's very similar to a pump action, being you have to cycle the action yourself, but it also kept you from having to place the individual rounds into the barrel. It was as simple as breaking the barrel and closing it. A little bit useful.
And honestly, with that, you could say that sorta inspired, or rather, kind of that sort of invention said this is not all that practical, but what if we did this, and thus led to, you could say it, to the invention of the pump action, where you see that tube, there is a second tube underneath the barrel, that's the magazine. And the pump action, of course, when you pull the pump back, there's metal rods that are connected to the action, and it pulls it back, ejects the round, a spent round, and a little lever in front or behind the tube will push up when that happens, which pushes a shell into the, or rather, as the action moves forward, the lever pops up, pushing your next round into your bolt as it's moving forward, and you close the bolt and you're ready to go. These certain weapons we have here are the M1912 trench gun, some M97s, the famous gun that the Germans sued the Americans over, which, that never happened. That's just an exaggeration. They made a little bit of a fuss out of it, but, they didn't sue America. But, all in all, these are very iconic shotguns, and I believe it's due to the fact of their sound. With semis, you can just you can just spam this thing downrange, but with pumps, for good reason, the sound is just crisp. When you fire it and then you just cycle the action. I have a Remington 870. Oh man, it is a very good. It's very satisfying, I will say, to cycle the action on one of those things.
I'm going to second that notion.
I want to record that notion and enter it into the Hall of Records of Truths.
Ooh, furthermore, around this time, kind of back in the 1800s with double barrels, but also around this time you had the variety of shot type. So you could have certain odd buckshot or certain odd bird shot. You had high brass, you had low brass, you had 7/8 load, so on and so forth. You started getting variety in the amount of pellets and power you had in each shot. So that's another thing to note.
I'd say even with just double barrels and single barrels break action on that, you still had variety in, well, really what you wanted to load into the gun, and some things stuck, things didn't. But
I mean, like
eventually figured out a lot of that.
Which really comes down to the invention of the shell. I apologize, Kento, for cutting you off, but it really more so comes down to the invention of the shell, and like the brass shells I talked about earlier, where you can load it with whatever. But it's just something I forgot to mention back there, so I just wanted to mention it here. So I'm sorry, sorry, Kento. Go ahead.
So another thing you can do with the new plastic shells, and this is something that was done. I'm aware of that was done during the Depression when it was really hard to get slugs. What they would do is they would do this thing called cutting shells, where you would sort of cut behind the shot, but not into the powder for the shell, but have a little piece of the plastic hanging on, so that when you fired it, the shell itself broke, and you would have a much tighter group and make a slug out of it.
Oh, real quick. They didn't use plastic shells didn't come about until the I believe it was the 60s, and were mainstream in the 70s. They were using paper by this point. Or rather, paper by the after when pump actions first came out. But what he is saying, what Kento is saying here, is very true. And actually, I think the reason paper shells came out was because that brass was incredibly expensive during the Depression. Although reusable, obtaining such was a different matter.
I believe that's all I have on this one.
I would second that motion. That's all I have for this slide.
What about you, Kento?
I think that's all I had.
All right, moving on.
Semi-autos and gas blowbacks. So, from here, I have notes for these things, and I'm not even joking. The only things I have written for this are some of these are gas blowbacks, so similar to how like an M4 or an AK works, you have gas tube, everything, that sort of thing. And they're self-loading pump actions. That's really about it because that's what a lot of these are. Now, you see that image there where it has the camouflage shotgun, the only camouflage up there? That is a Stoker 12 gauge shotgun. And they're very reliable, very smooth, fluid motion shotguns. I would know. I have one, and it's right here in my hands. It's a very good shotgun. And these, essentially, well, much like how semi-auto rifles were to bolt actions, they were just automated. They're automatic cycling firearms. Now, sideburns. I'm going to let you have the floor with the Browning Auto 5.
This beautiful gun that you see in the top left corners is one of my favorites. I mean, genuinely, it's praised typically as the first automatic shotgun of sorts, or first auto-loading shotgun. And with good reason. Of course, John Moses Browning made all amazing weapons, of course.
Oh, absolutely.
So this specific shotgun, of course, it's very simple. It's very simple. The whole concept of it is very simple. And they already had technology like it before, right? But not shotgun form, if I can say it like that. So it's goodness, what's the word? It's got a mechanical. It's not gas blowback. It's someone help me out here.
It'd be inertia driven.
Goodness, yes, inertia driven, and that's how most or a lot of weapons were, especially that early on. But inertia driven. It sends the bolt directly back, loading another shell in from the bottom, just like most of the shotguns you have today. It's really built, shockingly similar to the modern shotguns that are still being manufactured. Of course, it had a very long manufacturing life, but it was basically the basis to all semi-auto gas blowback or inertia driven blowback actions. So it's a very interesting gun, very fundamental to this group of shotguns. Very nice gun.
Which overall isn't surprising because Browning, a lot of the designs that the Remington 870, the Winchester 1912, pump action, the Winchester 97 actually were Browning designs that he worked with Winchester and then they went their separate ways. Not before, well, he worked with him on those shotgun designs. Or I think, and then with Remington, he helped him with the design and just paid me royalties, and then that was about it. And then went on to design the Browning Auto 5. So Winchester, excuse me. Really, Browning was rifles not so much. He wasn't that big on rifles, but he was a shotgun and a pistol guy. If the M1911 is not a indicator of such. But with that said, that is all I have for this slide. How about you guys?
that is about it.
I'm good.
I'd say.
Oh, and real quick before we move on, the I know the Spaz 12 is here, and yes, it is a gas. It is a semi-auto shotgun. It has a pump because it can fire. It can fire rubber bullets which have low gas pressures, causing them to not cycle properly. So when riot control situations come about, that's when the pump comes in handy. But whenever it's using lethal rounds, it's semi-auto. Furthermore, I still love the fact that the Spaz 12 has a car hook, which, if you don't know, that hook is designed to hook into, I think, like the handhold of your car. So if the police are in a chase, you could just hook your shotgun into the roof of your car and fire it out your window at someone you're chasing down. That is a thing. Don't know why. That is a thing.
In case you need it.
You
I
never
mean,
know.
someone might need it.
Mobile police brutality.
It's a
And
new
possible civilian casualties.
Yeah, a little here, a little there. Never hurt anyone.
Oh, here's
Nah.
a fun little fact. John Moses Browning acclaimed the Browning Auto 5 as his best achievement.
Oh yeah.
Just want to throw that out there. That's quoted from him. That's a Browning quote. You can quote me on that. But if that's all for the semi-autos, you can move on.
That's all
All
I
right.
have.
All right.
Yeah, I'm good here.
Sweet.
Auto shotties. You would think that these things would be awesome and would be picked up by every military ever, because the theme throughout this entire brief is more ammunition you can hold in one gun, and the faster you can load it. So, I mean, honestly, making an auto shotty is just not that hard. You just like do some adjustments to the firing mechanisms, and you just make it automatic, like how you do with rifles.
Maybe you can even think about the Saiga 12, which is bottom right gun, I believe, right?
Yep, the old
Yeah.
Russian sausage.
A lot of the what do you call it? A lot of the actions are very similar to rifles and whatnot. It even has a full magazine. It's fundamentally, practically the same, very similar. I don't think there's really much at all when it comes to differences. But it's basically a rifle that can fire many pellets at once.
Correct. So like that. What that said, you would think that with the trend of how shotguns evolved, these things would be mega useful. Not really. Really didn't take off because of the fact that shotguns were used for breach and clearing. So they were great for take out your hinges on a door, or for close quarters clearing. You would think that auto shotguns would be useful, or rather take off in that role, but not really, because semi-autos and pumps already do that role perfect.
Yeah.
But
And
they're lighter and they're not as bulky to wield as, say, an AA-12 or so on and so forth. And with that, and also how most countries, unless you're Russia, deal with hostage and civilian situations, and not wanting to minimize at all costs civilian casualties in hostage situations or in close quarter situations. A full automatic shotgun kind of flies in the face of that.
And of course, as much as I would love to own a fully automatic shotgun with a drum
Yes,
mag,
yes.
yeah, as much as I want that, you can't go wrong with something simple, even just like a break action, or just a simple, even just one of the semis, like Browning Auto 5. If I was going to pick a gun, I'm sure you know, I would be picking the Browning Auto 5. But it's you get to a limit when it comes to practicality. Semi-autos that's really gotten to the point. Of course, you have the what is it, Spaz 12, where you have the functionality of having both the pump action and the semi-auto. But beyond that, imagine trying to use like less lethal rounds, right? rubber rounds, and something that's fully automatic. It's really not going to work. You're going to have to cycle it every single time if you can't get enough pressure to cycle the action with the rubber round, which you most likely won't.
And the thing is, we're not these type of people, or at least I'm not, that says that, oh, we need to go back to the simple days. We need to use M14 carbines as our MBRs, main battle rifles. Um, I actually had a Kento was there, and I actually met a guy like that. We were talking about possible future U.S. weapon designs because they're threatening over potential level 5 body armor, and we were tossing, and one of the possibilities we had suggested was the AR-10, like what the Sudanese did, and adopt the AR-10, do some modifications of the bullets and all that stuff. And then this guy said, I think the AR platform is too outdated. Let's go back to the M14 carbine, to which I lost my collective crap, and I just started laughing out loud, because the point being that we're not these people that say that, oh yeah, guys, the F-35 is completely outclassed when it comes to dogfighting and maneuverability compared to the MiG-9, and we need to use MiG-9s. No, we're not those people. Technology and progression progression as far as military technology goes is pretty epic, and it's always something you want to seek. Keep in mind, it has to be practical, but simply, as Sideburn stated, for what you have in semi-auto and pump-action shotguns, as far as their combat role in militaries and police forces, these auto shotguns, you're at a point of diminished returns. And so, all in all, they're just not practical to field. I mean, you could. I mean, to field, yes, but your mission statement for what you do with shotguns are simply, they're not. You just don't. They're overkill. That's the best way to say it. They're overkill, and you just don't need them. So, go with the less expensive and more reliable option. That is all I have for this slide.
I think I've also spent everything I've got on this.
There was an attempt with the AA-12. It's had available to their options by giving it a grenade round that was supposed to be fireable out.
I think his internet may be bugging out on him.
Gun in the first place, and it's these things really don't have a home modern conflicts that everyone finds themselves in.
Ah, that's right. His internet is dying on him.
The PR nightmare of mag dumping the everyone involved in a hostage situation. But the one thing that I think could legitimately bring these to the battlefield, if this actually winds up working, which there's still a whole lot of dice up in the air on this, and there's a high possibility that it goes nowhere, is that using them for anti-drone weaponry. So you would basically have someone on a squad with a fully automatic shotgun, and then trying to shoot them like a skeet or clay pigeon before they FPV drone you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the Russians and Ukrainians are trying this now. I've only like seen it successfully done once. But time will tell on that. Maybe it is effective. Maybe it's not. If it's not, well, then these things are basically completely useless on the battlefield. Outside of looking and being really cool. But I mean, that's all I have for this.
That's all I have.
All right. Let's see.
All right.
Thank
Well,
you for watching.
that is all we have for today. This brief was going to be a shorter one. We expected that out of the gate. Not because we just don't care. Honestly, I myself am a very advocate shotgun lover. I love shotguns. I have like 6 of them in my house. ATF, please do not come to my house and confirm that. I'll just take me at my word, please. I don't want my dog shot. But with that in mind, this one was shorter because the idea of the shotgun doesn't really change, as I stated, doesn't really change about throughout history. I mean, yeah, you have the idea of slugs, and you could say, oh, rifle your shotgun barrel to fire slugs more accurate. Just use your rifle. Just use your rifle. But all in all, the idea of shotguns, basically, burst of damage in a single weapon. That is the shotgun. With that said, if you will, go ahead, like, subscribe, that whole thing, and thank you for watching, and also thank you for making it to this point. Well, I think that's all I have. That's all we have. So, get back to work.